Hey guys, Ian here from the Gamers Gaiden, and this week we're going to be taking a look at the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance Tactics. I played this guy on the Switch, came out last week, and yeah, this is a pretty competent tactical RPG. It follows the same beats as the Netflix series that was just released a few months back, and yeah, I mean, it was pretty enjoyable for the most part. I guess I'll get into that a little bit later. I did like that they included a lot of elements from the TV show, particularly this fight with Rian and his father at the Gobbles. I liked that the Gobbles were an actual like terrain element, and that if you knocked your enemies into them, it would do a ton of damage. And you kind of really had to work around that because the hunter is actually like he's really hard. That was one of the things that I did enjoy about this game is that when you have to fight any of the Skeksis, they do seem very powerful. Like you can really feel the power difference between the Skeksis and the Gelflings. So I thought they did a really good job of that. Yeah, I mean the game borrows pretty heavily from most tactical RPGs, particularly Final Fantasy Tactics. I found a lot in common between this game and Final Fantasy Tactics, which isn't a bad thing. It's not bad to borrow from very successful franchises. So, they incorporated a lot of similar systems that they use in Final Fantasy Tactics with this. So I thought they did that pretty successful. There was a few things that I found a little bit odd, like sections like this particular one where Brea was researching at the library, and you had to go around and attack the books, and that was the whole level. Like you had to attack these books, and then you also get attacked by librarians, and you're killing these other Gelflings kind of just for the sake of the level. It felt off, and it wasn't the only level like that. There was something, and I understand you're trying to tell the story as similar to the show as possible. I don't necessarily think that a tactical RPG was the best method to tell this story. I think they might have been able to tell it better through, maybe like a third-person action game. It's not like we don't have enough third-person action games, but I feel like they could have done that a little bit better. Had exploring sections with characters like Brea or Deet, who are a lot less combat-focused, and then have action sections, with Rian and Gurjin, and actually some of the more combat-oriented Gelflings. So, it's not a bad game. The fact that they do borrow so heavily from other successful franchises does make a huge difference, which, that's kind of like that's a good formula for success is seeing what your predecessors have done and recreating it. I mean, I loved this. I loved when the Aratham actually would take over Gelflings, and that was a big concern, because if they got close to any of your Gelflings, they would take over your Gelflings. But the odd thing is, so each level will give you it'll tell you what the party size is going to be, and it'll also tell you the kind of the average level, like what your party should be leveled at. And when I got to this one, it was like high teens. I think it was like 17, and I think I had one Gelfling that was probably that high level, and this really wasn't an issue. And I didn't play on easy. I was just playing through on normal, but I found that the difficulty was kind of minimal. I've read a few reviews on it, and that was one of the complaints, was that people found it very difficult. But I never had any issues with this. I did like the job system. I liked that it was a little bit more simple than some of the other games. But again, this isn't quite as long as like a Final Fantasy Tactics. So, getting a primary skill up to level 10 is going to take a lot more time than, say, in tactics, where you're going to finish at level 99. This, you're not going to quite be as high. So getting two primary skills up to 10 is going to be a little less crazy, and then you level up your secondary skills. And I did like that you only get 3 primary abilities, and then from your primary class, and then you can take 2 abilities from your secondary class. So it does make it a little bit more focused, because there are some abilities that are based around other abilities. So you have to make sure that your party actually kind of meshes cohesively that way, that you don't have an ability that you're not going to be able to use. So I thought that was pretty well done on their part. I did also like that they make a point of actually having a difference between the Gelflings. That just because there's so many different races of Gelflings, and they're all from very different areas. With Brea here being a Vapra, and they're more knowledge focused. She's more of a spellcaster. With Deep being a Groton, they actually have an ability where they're immune to blind because they live in caves. You've got the Podlings, which is nice. Hup's tree wasn't as complex. I know I'm not showing it here, but it only had 4 different options. And the Physgigs only had the one, which I thought was, if you're gonna have him in there, give him a few other options than just being a medic. It would have been nice for him to have a secondary skill. I never would have used him again after the first combat that I had to, just because I saw really no point in progressing him. He had way less options than any of the other characters. So yeah, it's a small complaint in that regard, but I really did like that they made a point of having different abilities for the different Gelflings, because again, they're all from different places. That's important. The equipment store was pretty decent. It was basically all the same equipment. If you'd start with your base stuff, and then pretty much everything moves up at the same progress level, and it becomes progressively more expensive, which I always found that I never had enough money, or I was I'd have to throw a ton of money at something to get it. So I tend to not buy too much equipment. It gives you enough as it is. This was one of my favorite things. The way that they decided to kind of tell the story. They would have these comic book inspired cutscenes, which I thought was great. Instead of having an actual 3D rendered cinematic, they would do these comic book inspired cutscenes, which I thought was a really good way of telling some of the story elements that they couldn't just display. But really, overall, I kind of found myself getting bored a lot. I was super excited for this to come out, to the point where I actually I pre-purchased it, pre-installed it, and I started playing it at midnight when it was released. And I played a little bit, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, and I was pretty jazzed about it early on. And even just being able to see the different abilities, everything kind of makes sense. You don't really see a lot of Gelfling archers, so they're throwing rocks. You don't really see a lot of spellcasters, but seeing them throw out these cool spells and having different abilities that they can use, it was fun. But the challenge wasn't there for me, and I know people are going to tell me that I could just put it on hard mode, but then I guess the concern is that it would just be a little bit too ridiculous. I feel like a normal should be enough. You know, it should be just challenging enough to make it fun and, you know, not way over the top, because everyone knows that I'm kind of not great at video games, which again is something in itself. Like, I'm not great at video games, yet I never had a single issue with a level in this. So the truth is, I ended up just like quitting a lot, you know, and I would just lose focus. I would bail out and go play something that was a little bit more interesting. And it's not to say that this is a bad game, because it isn't. It's a very competent game. If you're a big fan of the Dark Crystal, I think this is something that you might really enjoy. But for me, you know, I'm a fan. I enjoy it, but I'm not like a mega fan. So maybe it just wasn't for me. But yeah, we don't assign numbers to any of these reviews, so, you know, take that for what you will. But yeah, so thanks so much for watching, guys. If you love the Dark Crystal, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll be playing Stardew until I talk to you guys next.